Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Mattias. I will be your flight instructor today. Today we are going to do a pre-flight inspection, which is an inspection we are doing on the aircraft before every time we're doing a flight lesson. So you will follow along and I will show you what we will look at. The first thing we want to do is to check the fuel quality of the aircraft. Since it's been parked here in the hangar during the night, there could be some residues or dirt that gathers in the fuel tanks in the wing, which we have to drain in the lowest point of the wing. We do that by using this fuel drainer, and we have some points here under the wing where we can take a sample of the wing and check the quality of it. What we're looking for is dirt or residue. We're also looking that we don't have any water in the wing. We have 3 points of checking the fuel, so we have one in each wing. So we just check the right wing, and we would like to do the same thing on the left wing. Once again, I'm looking for residues, dirt or water in the tank, but this looks really good, so no issues there. We also have a third draining point, which is underneath the engine that we have to check. So I just turned on the fuel selector so we can get some fuel going around. And we will check the last point here. Same thing again. A small sample of the fuel to check the quality. It looks good to me. Then we'll just throw it out. So after we've checked the fuel, we are now allowed to move the aircraft. That's why we want to check the fuel first, so we don't mix around the dirt, if there is any. Next thing we want to do is to check the electrics of the aircraft. So I will turn on the battery switch, and I will check some lights and some other instruments before moving on. Now we will check the electrics of the aircraft. So what I'm going to do is turning on this master switch, which is a battery switch, and you can hear and you can even see that some of the lights are coming on. I'm going to turn on something called a pitot heat. I'm also going to turn on the lights of the aircraft. So we have a strobe light, a landing light, and a navigational light. So now when we have the lights on, we want to check them visually to see that they are working as intended. So on the left side of the wing here, on the wingtip, we have a red navigational light, we have a white blinking light, and then we also have a white navigational light pointing backwards so the aircraft behind us can see that where we are. We also have a white navigational light on the back so aircraft behind us can see where we are. Beneath the left wing, we also have a funny instrument called a pitot. This one is heated, so I just turned on the heat so I can feel that it's getting warm. Then we will have to move on to the left side of the wing to check that one as well. Then we have to check the right wing as well. And as you can see, it's a little bit different here. Now we have a green navigational light on the right wingtip. We have a strobe light that's white. And once again, we have a white navigational light pointing backwards. Another thing to check on the right wing is something called a stall warner. So I will just push this thing, and you can hear the beeping noise, which is what we want to hear. The last light we want to check is the landing light that I turned on. And as you can see, there's a white light in front of the aircraft, which we use for taxiing, so we can see on the ground, and also an indication of landing for the control tower to see us, that we are committed to land. Now that we have checked the electrics and the lights of the aircraft, we are going to perform something called a walk around, which is part of the pre-flight inspection. And the walk around basically is walking around the aircraft, checking the overall conditions and the surfaces of the aircraft. We usually start from the same point every time, in this case from the left main gear, where we want to check the overall conditions of the cowlings and coverings of the tire and the wheel, and we try to see if the rubber on the tire is in good conditions, and also the main landing gear. There are no liquids on the ground from the brakes with the brake fluids. We check the overall conditions underneath the wing, that there's nothing, no damages or no dirt that is covering the wing surface. Then what we want to do is walk along the wing. Then we want to check the leading edge of the wing to check that it's clear, that nothing is disturbing the airflow of the wing. So I usually use my hand just walking along the wing and check the leading edge. Here, for example, you can see a small little dent in the wing. But there's a note in the documentation saying that it's been checked by the mechanics and it's such a small dent that it's okay to fly with it. Once again, you can see the lights and the overall condition looks fine. We continue along the wing all the way to the trailing edge of the wing. Here you can see a control surface called an aileron, and you can even see a small little weight hanging down here, which you will learn all about in your education. But here I'm just looking for a free movement of the aileron in the direction that it's supposed to move. Moving back on the inner part of the wing, we have a flap, which is supposed to be still here, since it's not been changed inside from the aircraft. It's supposed to be firm, not moving when I touch it, which it is now, which looks good. I continue to check all the flat surfaces that are aerodynamically constructed to fulfill the purpose of the aircraft's overall shape. Once again, I check the overall surface of the fuselage. Also at the same time, checking beneath, we have some antennas that we want to check as well, and the overall condition all the way back to the tail. We also want to check the fuselage, which is the aircraft, the body of the aircraft, on the upper surface as well. So you can see we have some antennas. Once again, they're looking in good condition. We want to check the vertical tailplane, overall conditions with air, it's undisturbed airflow. Once again, more antennas. These ones are navigational antennas. We want to check the tailplane and the tailplane surfaces. We have free movement of the tailplane, so we are able to control the aircraft climbing and descending. We also check the rudder movement, that it's moving in the direction it's supposed to do and sits firmly in the direction that it's not supposed to move. Once again, checking the lower surfaces as well. The overall condition looks well. All the fittings and the screws looks clean and in good condition. Moving to the right side of the aircraft. Once again, the overall surfaces are clean and no damages. Continuing down the fuselage, once again, coming to the right wing and the right wing trailing edge. Here we have the flaps once more. We can also check the right main landing gear, overall conditions of the cowling. Once again, no liquids from the braking fluid on the ground. We have the fittings of the flaps. In general, condition looks good. Continuing along the trailing edge of the wing, coming to the right wing aileron with free movement, and the fittings looks good. They are moving in the correct conditions. And if you are looking inside the cockpit, you can actually see that the flight stick is moving as I move the aileron on the wing. So I want to see that it's moving in the direction which is the correct direction. So continuing down the wing, we have the wingtip. Once again, light that we previously checked is in good condition. And here I'm using my hand once again, feeling the surface of the leading edge of the wing. Here we have the stall warner, once again, which made the funny beeping noise that we checked when we checked the electrics. Continuing all the way down on the wing surfaces. Once again, I will punch down and check beneath the wing, looking at the main landing gear from this direction as well. Everything looks fine. Coming to the front of the aircraft, we have the engine cowling and the engine inside, which we will check shortly. We're moving forward to the front. As we checked before, we had the landing lights in good conditions. We also have some cooling surfaces that we need to check. So we have the nose landing gear. Here it's much easier to see the overall conditions of the tire. You want to see that it's not too worn or damaged, but it looks good. Also see and check the dampening of the nose wheel. We have free movement of the propeller, and in free movement I want to feel that it's actually a little bit of resistance. Since we have piston engines, we are doing compressions in the cylinder that I can feel while I'm rotating the propeller. We also have the spinner, which is called here, checking the overall conditions and that it's aerodynamically formed as it is. Checking the overall conditions of the propeller, especially, once again, the leading edge of the propeller in the direction that it's rotating. So we have both sides of the propeller looking good. And then, as you start to notice, we are coming back to the point where we started our walk around. So now we have completed a full walk around of the aircraft. Lastly, we want to check the engine condition here inside the engine cowling. So we are going to open up the right side of the cowling, checking the overall condition of the engine, the wiring and the hosing, as much as we can see. On the right side here, we are able to check the oil level of the engine. So we need to open up this gasket here, or container, which have oil in it. And we have an oil stick here. And if I pull up the stick here, it's quite difficult to see the oil level. And the problem is, this is a closed oil system, which means we have to push the oil back into this reservoir to be able to see how much oil is actually in the engine. The only way for us to do that is actually to rotate the propeller, pushing the oil back into the reservoir. So we're actually forcing the oil back into this chamber here. And I'm doing it by rotating the propeller, creating a compression in the cylinders, which will push back the oil. And it can take a while. So we're going to do these rotations for about 1 minute, and eventually we will hear a funny noise from the engine. It almost sounds like a toilet. So, as you could hear, the oil has now been pushed back into the system, and it's now a little bit easier to check the oil. So what we are looking for is to see that the oil level is above the notch here. We want to have it on the flat space on the stick. Normally, since the engine is cold now, it's a little bit more tricky to push back the oil since it's a little bit thicker as it's cold. So what we usually do is to check the oil again after we've started the engine when the oil is warm, and then it's easier to push back the oil into this reservoir. But as you can see, it's actually above the notch, so it's okay. if I were to go on a longer flight, I would probably fill up some extra oil to make sure I have sufficient oil in the engine. So now that we have checked the right side of the engine, we want to do the same thing on the left side. So we are going to open up here, and on this side you will see mostly the same things. There's one difference here. There's no oil reservoir here. Instead, we have a coolant reservoir here. And this is an expansion chamber. And here you can see the coolant liquid, which is supposed to be between the minimum and the maximum. And you can see it's a little bit darker here compared to up here. So it's actually just at the rim here. So that one looks good. And the overall conditions of the engine as well, we have the hosing, we have the wiring. As I can see, everything looks fine. There are no damages to the engine, and I think we are good to go. So I will just close this up, and now we are done. We have performed a pre-flight inspection of this Tecnam aircraft, and we are ready to fly.